Welcome back to another episode of the Founders Cut. Today I'm here with Mai Vu, the founder of Mai Vino. I am excited to have her on because, honestly, I meet a lot of founders, and every time I talk to somebody, I'm always surprised with what I learn about an industry or a sector. And so, after talking with Mai, I learned a lot about the wine industry, and I thought it'd be interesting for people to hear about and also maybe be exposed to a new product that they might want to try. So, without further ado, thank you for joining. Before we jump into what the product is and what your brand is, tell people about your journey to becoming an entrepreneur. What were you doing before this?
So I was actually working in advertising. I spent like a decade doing consumer research, doing brand positioning, selling, different products. And my journey to it was like I always loved telling stories. I loved getting deep into research, learning about like how people interact with products, why they interact with products, and kind of going down that rabbit hole of asking why. I think the challenge that I had at some point working in advertising is that sometimes you sell products that aren't that great, right? You have brands coming in, they're like, we sell the best internet ever, the fastest internet. Like, I want to be a technology company. And you're looking at it and you're like, you bought a bunch of terrible cable companies and now you're rebranding it, right? And, for me, I find passion from I sell best when I love things, right?
Mm,
And I've always known that. Like I'm not very good at BS. I'm not a very good actor. And so unfortunately for me, I kind of was like, I want to sell something I believe in,
hmm
right? And I just kind of went through the iterations of, looking at different industries that I loved. I loved wine, so and I loved that there was kind of a contrarian aspect to what I was doing or what I was thinking, and dived into it.
Yeah. No, that
And
makes a lot of sense. I think everyone can relate to that. If you're passionate about it or interested in it, you're going to put more effort in. So I don't blame you at all, and I'd say many people that are entrepreneurs probably fell into what they're doing today because of that reason. So tell us more about My Vino.
Yeah, so Mai Vino is makes it easy to enjoy organic wine anytime, anywhere. We package these great wines in these pouches that keep the wine fresh for a month after opening. So we have an airtight spout that keeps it fresh. So you don't have to drink a full bottle. You can have a glass at a time. And it also reduces wine's carbon footprint by 80%. All our wines are organic. Wild fermented or native fermented, which means that we're using natural yeast in the process. And so it's all higher quality winemaking that you wouldn't necessarily find in this type of packaging. And so when I kind of talked about, I love being a contrarian, I thought I saw like an area in the industry where there was room for improvement, right? You have so much box wine in the industry. People drink it because they love having it by the glass, but it's not organic. It's filled with additives, filled with dyes. And then beyond that packaging, in fact, there's only 7% of vineyards farmed organically worldwide, right? And so I saw there was a huge opportunity to not just kind of fill the passion point of I just like having a glass at a time, but can we bring better wine into this industry? Why are we spending so much money on wine that kind of, I call it airport wine. You have a glass of wine at the airport, it doesn't really taste good.
hmm Yeah, have you on the aspect of taste, have you had people like blind taste yours versus like the standard processed wine? And what have people said to you about the differences?
I haven't actually done like a 100% blind taste test, but I've pitched, I built the business in New York, so that means bringing the bags, pitching every single mom and pop wine store. And I think the best feedback I always have gotten, especially as it relates to the Pinot Noir, because red wine is really hard to make great. Pinot Noir is even harder because it's a very sensitive grape. And so you need very good growing conditions or perfect growing conditions. And people will be like, wow, like that tastes like Pinot Noir. Like
Mm,
really cute bottle shops in New York being like, that tastes like Pinot Noir. And I was like, yes, that's the point. It's
right.
supposed to taste like great wine that you get in a bottle. And they're like, I know, but like, wow, like it actually tastes like that. Right. And I think that's kind of, what we're going for, which is like people who know wine being even surprised, right? Like even their own biases are in front of them. But once they taste it, they're like, this is good wine. I can taste the quality in it. Um,
Yeah. Did you support wine brands in your former life, or was just wine something you were naturally interested in and passionate about, so you went into that sector?
So, I mean, I was always a wine drinker. I think I
Hmm.
saw a lot of liquor companies come in, and we worked on those companies, and they're always about how do you create more occasions to drink, right? They're like, how do we make like whiskey an afternoon drink, right? Because they want to drive velocity and usage.
Sure.
And I looked at wine and I was like, wine is in a bottle. Most of it is still corked today. Even though like 5% will have cork taint or is can be cork taint. People aren't happy with screw caps. They still kind of have biases towards
Hmm.
it. And thought wine is just getting in front of itself beyond just the packaging being annoying. So you can't have a glass. When you go into a wine store, you're just so confused, right?
Hmm.
Like you don't know where to start. It's like too many choices. It's hard to make a decision. You don't know if it's a chateau, a grape, just a name,
Yeah.
and you don't even know how to pronounce it. And then you come into the store and the person's like, "Oh, how much do you want to spend?" And then the second question is like, "Oh, what kind of taste are you looking for?"
Yeah.
And like as someone coming into the industry and knowing, being really interested in the consumer and making it easier for consumers to enjoy or just understand
Yeah.
different fields, I felt like there was such a disconnect. And so I was like, this is such like there's so much you can do in this industry to make it easier for everyone and make people feel comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And
I always am, I find it funny when people s- claim to know so much about wine, but they aren't actually like trained in the
yes,
space. And for me, and I'm not a fancy wine drinker. I'll enjoy a glass if it's put in front of me and people offer it, but it's very binary. And I don't mean this in a bad way. It's either wine that's good enough to drink or it's wine that's bad and I know it's bad, right? And so like I think the biggest thing that people are afraid of when they go into a liquor store is, am I going to spend money on something where there is a greater than 25% chance that it's going to be bad? And if you're going to spend like $10 to $20 on a bottle, that's a bad experience, right? And I think like where you have an opportunity is removing that chance occurrence of a bad experience, because when they pick up your bag, they know that it's going to be consistent, they know it's going to be good, and they don't need to be a wine snob to enjoy it and like know that their money's going towards a bottle that they're not going to regret,
yeah.
right? So yeah, I think that's a
Kind
great
of,
I think that's a great thing that you realized in the industry. It's kind of pretentious in a lot of ways. I'll be the first to say I don't have any friends in the wine industry, so whatever. But yeah, it's very arrogant. It's very like hard to get into. So there needs to be some on ramps into the sector, and something like your company could be very well that.
yeah. And I think what you think like in parallel is like if you go to Europe and you get a €1 glass of wine, it's always good,
Hmm.
right? Like there is no like huge binary as opposed to like you go to the US, it's like you spend $14 on a glass of wine and you're like, I can taste the sugar in this. Like
Yeah.
I'm getting a headache from this automatically.
Yeah.
So I think, even bringing that culture of like being okay with wine, enjoying it, having it, making it easy, like it's like something that pairs with, your company and like people that you're doing, hanging out with. It's not, it doesn't have to be prophesized or,
Yeah.
you get
I,
dorky about it all the time.
I can't agree more. Let's make this a little bit educational, because
Yeah.
I remember when we talked, I was educated a lot. So, if I take a traditional bottle of wine that's corked and I uncork it, how long does that bottle go for before it's considered like to be stale or gone bad?
So probably between 2 to 5 days. And I say that the duration is based on like the quality of wine. If it's
Okay.
really bad wine, it's gonna go bad in like a day, right?
Mhm.
Basically what happens is the oxygen gets stuck in the bottle, it oxidizes the wine, and the only way to get the oxygen out is to essentially push a heavier gas to
Yeah.
shove the oxygen out, right? So
Yeah.
when you think about our packaging, you don't really open the wine so the oxygen doesn't get trapped inside. And as you drink the wine, the bag collapses on itself.
Hmm.
So there's no oxygen that can like remain within there. So you have 2 to 5 days. Obviously, I've had a lot of people say to us, your wine actually stays fresher than 30 days. I've definitely drank it like
Sure.
60 days in, 90 days in, and I'm like, oh wow, it's still like really fresh.
Yeah.
I don't always like, I just like to say 30 days and then
Yeah,
you
you want to err on the side
can.
of, yeah, yeah,
I don't know how you guys are storing it, all these things. So those are the
sure.
big, yeah.
So just from that perspective, you're probably saving people money just because they don't have to. Well, not even money, but just like I don't even know if I want to use the word stress, but the stress of their wine going bad because they want to have a glass, but they're not going to drink the whole bottle, but they don't want to waste that bottle, right? So it
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Another thing that I was curious about is you talked about the process that currently is like the industry standard, and then you talked about how yours is differentiated because it's more it's you're using organic processes and natural yeast. Like, what is the biggest difference between what you're doing and what the others are doing, and why aren't others doing what you're doing?
Um, I'd say the biggest difference is the farming, right? So we use organic regenerative agriculture to grow our grapes. That means having cover crops, increasing the biodiversity within the vineyard. So having like lavender, which attracts bees. Um, Cover crops, they're like add different nutrients into the
Mm,
soil. I kind of relate it to, we don't drug the soil, and so the soil is able to like create the nutrients that are required, right? And then if you look at conventional vineyards, they're using pesticides or herbicides, and basically it's like when you drug the body doesn't necessarily create the like nutrients that it requires because it's getting it from the drugs, and eventually it gets drier and drier, and then you get, like the output isn't as great
mm,
over time, right? And so what happens with that kind of winemaking is that you need to add like additives afterwards, like coloring, acid, right? Different things to bring more life into the wine, which I think is the challenge. The thing with organic growing is obviously it's high touch, right? After harvest, we introduce like the llamas and the sheeps into the vineyard, and they like, eat the weeds and the cover crops, right? Instead of using that, a conventional vineyard might use like an herbicide, right?
sure.
And cheaper, but not as great. We also like ferment our own compost. So that takes 6 months, right? So you're, instead of using fertilizer,
Yeah.
right? Which a lot of it is made of oil. So there's a lot of things that, are different in terms of that kind of winemaking. I think from a human perspective, it's also better because you have to know that these growers and winemakers are going out to the vineyard, like eating the grapes. Like you
Hmm.
can actually, and if you're using pesticides, they're consuming that, right? And you can
Yeah.
actually test wines to see if there's pesticides in it. It's a really easy test, right? Because it's on the grapes, it gets fermented. It's not something that can be hidden. It can be
Yeah.
easily tested for. So I think that kind of growing is the big thing. We also use the native yeast, or the wild yeast in the vineyard. Conventional wines will use industrial yeast, so kind of made in the factory. The big thing is the idea is like the yeast from the vineyard understands the grapes, right? It also will take longer to ferment, because of that, right? And you also get more flavors from, the wines that way. I think a lot of people talk about terroir, and I think I can get kind of geeky into it, but a lot of times people are like, oh, it's from the terroir of the wine. That's how you get those flavors. And some scientists today are talking about how it's actually from the yeast,
Mm,
right? There's different cultures of yeast that live within that vineyard. They help to ferment the wines and create that flavor. And
sure.
granted, they live on that terroir, right? So, but it's like you just think of these little microorganisms
Yeah.
making your flavor. And so, having a diversity of that brings like a more unique flavor. It takes longer to ferment, but you have a higher quality product, as well. So those are,
Gotcha.
I know I went kind of deep, so I don't know.
No, it's all right. No,
If
I think it's important. I think there's a lot of aspects that many people aren't aware of when it comes to a bottle of wine or a bag of wine or a box of wine, whatever you want to call it. People are often, you know, I think they just it's one of those things where like if you're teaching a class and you ask people if anyone has a question, no one raises their hand because they don't want to be seen in the audience as like the only one that doesn't know the answer. But in reality they all have questions, very similar ones to one another, but they don't ask it. Like, so when I go to a liquor store, if I'm picking up a bottle of wine, I'm usually just like not going to buy the most expensive, not going to buy the cheapest, and pick something from the middle rack, right? So
Yeah.
I go back to like There needs to be on ramps for things that are highly specialized and require a lot of knowledge. And the wine industry is one of those where if you don't know it and don't live and breathe it, yeah, you're always going to be lost a little bit. So appreciate like a company like yours coming in and saying like I can hold your hand through this and give you a good experience. Tell me something about something you've learned as a founder that you wish you knew before you started this, right? Like I like giving actionable feedback to founders from founders, so love to hear something that's top of mind for you.
I mean, I think, um, I guess it's good that I am not really good at BS, but you really have to like telling your story because I mean, there's no such thing as like overnight success, right? So
Hmm.
you're gonna need to love telling that story for like 2 years in, 5 years in, and now I'm like 10 years out because that will keep your product. I think that'll keep, your product. It will make you abide by certain tenets that are important when you started, and it will also you just need it. It's a long game. I don't know. I
Be
don't
true to
know
yourself. Yeah,
yourself. I was like, I didn't realize it would be that important, but now I'm like looking back, I'm like, thank God, because
yeah,
if I was selling something that I kind of thought was like a good idea and I had to do it over and over again, I didn't really like that story and I didn't like that industry, it would be miserable.
yeah,
And I think the second thing that I would like to add is just, find the right partners because, I didn't have a background in wine. I kind of came into the industry by meeting winemakers, emailing a bunch of them, having some take me under their wing and like, small winemakers in the Finger Lakes that really helped get me to where I am today,
hmm,
which, isn't that far, but they help, they brought me in, right? Like you're beyond being, a woman, Asian, not having a background in wine, like there's a lot of things that, weren't meshing, like a
sure,
lot of barriers, right? And it only takes one or two people to help you get into it. And like I'm very grateful to those people. I don't know why they decided to help. Like I go to the winemaker in the Finger Lakes, I stay at his place all the time with him and his family. We work on wines together. We talk about stuff. We text,
yeah,
like I love that I have a new friend. And like,
yeah,
I used to work in advertising behind a computer, behind PowerPoints or keynotes. And like you don't meet people, right?
yeah,
And like it's so great to see other people and meet and hear their stories.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. That's the fun.
I think, to summarize that, right? If you're not passionate, if you're not, you know, all in on it, people can see that. But at the same time, to your second point about network and give people giving you a chance, I think those people gave you a chance because they could see it in your eyes, they could hear it in your voice that you were interested in something that they loved and are interested in. Inherently, I think people want to help. And so when people like that get approached by someone that's genuine and authentic and passionate, it's hard not to, right? Like I get hit up by students all the time that are coming out of college asking about VC or startups, and the ones that I think are legitimately very excited about it, not just trying to build their resume or build their network like in an arbitrary way. I stop what I'm doing to try to help them because to your point, I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't have select people along the journey, unlock doors for me that would have traditionally been doors that I can't get through. So yeah, I totally think that's important for people that are listening. Believe in what you're trying to build because it's going to be hard, and then surround yourself with amazing people that can help you get there. And if you believe in it, you're going to find those people easier. So I think that's great advice. Part of this too is I believe in serendipity. What are the types of people you're trying to find and get connected with? Is it purchasers at liquor stores? Is it investors? Is it other people that you want to bring on the team? Let the people know what the types of folks you're trying to get connected with.
Yeah, so we're launching, in the next few months in Sprouts, Target, natural growth.
Congratulations.
I know it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey. But so we're looking for investors to help with that growth. We also, would always love intros to like wine stores or, retailers that want to bring us in, or even, if you're a customer and you want it in your local wine store,
Hmm.
you know, let us know, hit us up and tell your wine store. I think that's always how we, love to build like word of mouth and get people excited. Because I think wine stores, even if you're going into a Whole Foods and those things, like wine stores are kind of the backbone of our business. And
Yeah.
you should rely on them to help guide you as well. They're there for that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, and most importantly, people that love wine, give it a try. Try out My Vino and see if it's the right product for you. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised that it is as good or better than the bottles that you might be picking up off the shelf. So try something new and see if it's a good fit for your wine drinking pleasures.
And we can
Well,
give you 25% off if you want to use Founder's Cut. Right.
okay. Sounds good. I will make sure people can hear that too. So if you want a little bit of a discount on your first purchase, use Founder's Cut and buy yourself a bag or two or three. I think they got four. You have four flavors, right?
Yeah, we have a Sauvignon Blanc, a Pinot Noir, a rosé, and an orange wine, which is our latest wine. It comes from an 80-year-old vine from the South Pacific coast of Chile. It's
Man,
really fun.
that's so cool. I love how personal your supply chain is, right? It's literally farm to farm to cup, right? Farm to
Yeah.
glass. So, I think you're doing it the right way. And I think like where you're gonna win out is eventually you're gonna have, and you already probably have a very, very loyal base of users that become like your advocates for you. So, yeah, I think it'll be fun to see your products in more stores as the days and years go on. So, any last words that you want to throw out there, shout outs or words of wisdom, and then we'll just kind of wrap it up.
Um, our wines are really great for a damp January, like you don't have to go dry, you can go damp and you can have a glass and then, or cook with the glass and then get to the bag in February.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I think for the wine lovers in my life, I'm gonna try giving them a bag of your wine instead and see what they think about it. Because I like supporting the upstarts and the smaller players in the spaces in any vertical. So, yeah, it's very clear that you're passionate about it. So, Mai, thank you so much again for your time. Thank you for telling us your story, and yeah, I'm excited to get this one out there to people.
Yeah, thank you.